Lakota chief's old war horse went blind and starving. A widow nursed it back and was given a home. The horse was gone on a Tuesday. I know it was Tuesday because that was the morning I had ridden out to the Eastern Creek to check the fence line that the agent's men had told me I was no longer permitted to move, and when I came back, the corral gate was standing open and Hoka was not in it. That gate had a wire loop on it that took 2 hands to work. I had built it that way on purpose. Hoka had not opened it himself. I stood in the corral for a while with the gate hanging open behind me and looked at the chewed place in the dirt where he'd stood for the past 3 winters, that half circle he'd worn bare just pacing in the cold, and I thought, someone let him out. Someone lifted that loop with both hands, walked him through and closed the gate behind them. Closed it, like they wanted me to believe he'd simply wandered off. He was 31 years old. You do not wander far at 31, blind in one eye, barely eating, hooves gone soft from standing in wet ground because I couldn't move him to the higher pen anymore. The agent had told me that pen was on the wrong side of a line that had been redrawn, a line on a piece of paper that no one had shown me before they drew it. But the gate was closed, so whoever took him wanted to be gone before I noticed. I will tell you about Hoka. Not all of it. There is too much, and some of it is not for telling to anyone, but enough so you understand why I stood in that empty corral for longer than a man my age should stand in the cold without moving. His full name in the old language is something that I will not try to put into the sounds of English, but the short name, Hoka, means badger. I called him that when he was 2 years old and tried to bite me 4 days in a row while I was working to gentle him. He never did stop trying to bite. Not entirely, not until he was maybe 25 and the teeth had gone soft. By then it was a habit between us, and I think we both missed it when it stopped. I rode him in the last years, when riding was still what we did. I will not name the battles or the places because they do not belong in this story. What belongs is this. There were mornings when I swung onto his back before light, and the cold air was so sharp it burned going in. And he was so alive under me that I could feel his heart through my knees, and I was so alive on top of him that I knew, the way you know a thing without being able to say it, that the two of us together were something that had not existed before and would not exist again. That is not a small thing. A man who has ridden like that does not forget what it felt like. Afterward, when the riding was over and the years changed and things became what they became, I kept him. People said I was foolish. The agent's assistant, a young man from somewhere east who wore his hat too tight on his head, told me in his patient, slow voice that a horse that age was a drain. He used that word, drain. I looked at him until he stopped talking, and then I went back to where Hoka was standing, and I scratched him between the ears the way he liked, the spot just behind the left one where the skin was thin and you could feel the bone. And he lowered his head about 2 inches like he always did, like it cost him something to admit he liked it. That was 3 weeks before the gate. I do not know how long I stood in that corral, long enough that my knees started to complain, which they do now. I am 64 years old. My knees began complaining about 6 years ago and they have not stopped. Then I went inside and got my coat. The tracks were not hard to follow. The ground along the creek had been soft for a week from the runoff, and whoever had led Hoka out had not tried to disguise where they'd gone. That told me something. This was not a theft with any cleverness to it, or any caution. Hoka was taken by someone who didn't expect me to follow, or didn't care if I did. A man who doesn't care is more dangerous than a man who's careless. But I followed anyway. There were 2 sets of boot prints going out, and only one coming back, which meant whoever brought the horse somewhere either left from there or was still there. The prints went south along the creek for about 2 miles, then cut east away from the water, and then they crossed onto land I recognized as what used to be Harmon's ground before Harmon sold it last fall to a man I'd never seen. The tracks went through a gap in a cedar fence and up a low rise and down the other side, and that's when I saw the buildings. A house and a barn and what had been a garden, though it was too early yet for anything to be growing, and the soil looked hard and pale, like it hadn't been worked in a season. The barn was leaning slightly south, which meant either the foundation had shifted or someone had fixed it badly. Two of the fence posts in the near pasture were heeled over. The house itself looked like it was being kept, fresh mud daubed into a gap in the chimney, a new wooden latch on the front door that was lighter in color than the boards around it. But it was being kept by one pair of hands, and one pair of hands is not always enough. Hoka was in the pasture. He was standing near the far fence and he'd been brushed. I could tell from that distance, the way the winter coat had been smoothed down his neck and over his flanks. It was not a good brushing. Someone who doesn't brush horses regularly had done it, but it was thorough, the kind of thorough you get when you go slowly and pay attention. There was a bucket near him that had water in it, or had recently had water in it because the ground around it was dark, and there was hay. Not much, maybe 2 or 3 flakes, spread out a little so he could work at it without having to move his feet too much. He was eating. I had not seen him eat like that, with any real interest, in a month. I stood at the fence line and watched him for a while. His head was down in the hay and his tail moved once, slow, like he was comfortable. His left eye, the bad one, was turned toward me, but he didn't lift his head, which meant he hadn't caught my scent yet. The wind was wrong for him. I should say here that I was not feeling what you might expect a man to feel, seeing a stolen thing being tended. I was feeling something more complicated than anger and less simple than relief. I was feeling the particular discomfort of a man who has been preparing himself for a loss, and then finds the loss hasn't quite happened yet, and doesn't know what to do with the extra time. The sound of a door was the first I knew of her. Not the front door, a side door off the barn, a small one I hadn't seen. It opened hard, like it stuck in the frame, and she had to put a shoulder into it. She came out with a bucket in each hand, both of them full from the weight she was carrying, and she walked with her head down watching where she put her feet, which is why she didn't see me right away. She was maybe 40, maybe a few years past. Brown hair, more gray in it than brown, pulled back and pinned in a way that hadn't lasted the morning. Her coat was a man's coat, too big in the shoulders, the cuffs turned back. Work boots, the leather cracked at the toe of the right one. She set one bucket down by the garden fence and carried the other to where Hoka was standing, and she talked to him while she poured it. I couldn't make out the words at that distance. Just the sound of a voice, low and steady, the kind of voice you use when you're not expecting an answer but you're talking anyway because silence gets heavy. Hoka raised his head when she got close, turned the good eye to her, did not move away. She ran a hand down his neck, just the once, the way you'd touch something you weren't sure yet how much you were allowed to care about. Then she turned and saw me. She didn't startle, which surprised me. A woman alone on a piece of ground like this, a man standing at her fence she hadn't heard come up, most people startle. She looked at me for a moment, then looked at Hoka, then looked back at me, and I could see her working something out. "Yours," she said, not a question. "Yes," I said. She nodded once, like that settled something she'd already half suspected. "Found him in the creek bottom 2 days ago, Tuesday evening. He was down." "Down how?" I said. She looked at Hoka again. On his side, struggling to get up, his near hind leg was caught in some wire. Old wire, rusted, probably been there for years under the brush. "I got him loose." She paused. "It took a while." "You got him loose by yourself," I said. "Yes, no pride in it, no apology either, just the fact." "And you brought him here." "He couldn't stay down there, the leg needed cleaning, and he was," she stopped, started over. "He was thin." She said it straight at me, and she didn't make it soft, and she didn't make it an accusation either. She said it the way you say a true thing that you know might sting, but you say it anyway because anything else would be a lie, and lies don't help a horse. I felt that land the way she meant it to. Thin. I had known he was thin. I had watched him get thin over 2 winters, and I had not been able to do enough about it, and I had known that, and it was the one thing in my life at that time that I could not make my mind get past. "What's wrong with his eye?" she said. "Nothing's wrong with it," I said. "It stopped working." "There's a difference." She thought about that. "What do I call you?" she said. "Lakota," I said. "I'm Clara Foss," she said. "Used to be Clara Whitmore. Don't know why I said the other one." I didn't say anything to that. People say things when they're uncertain. It doesn't always need a response. She reached into her coat pocket and came out with an apple that had been cut in quarters, the pieces kept together. She held one out on her palm to Hoka. He took it. "He likes them," she said. "I gave him one yesterday and he perked up enough to walk the fence line twice. Figured it was worth doing again." "He has always liked apples," I said. "Since he was young." She looked at me then, not the way people look at me, which is usually careful, the way you're careful around something you don't entirely know what to do with, but level, like she was checking a measurement. "You want to take him back today?" she said. "Yes," I said. She nodded, but she didn't reach for a lead or step back to let me through the fence. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the horse. "The leg's still healing," she said. "If you move him now across that ground the way the creek's running, you'll open it back up." She looked at me again. "Give it a week, maybe 10 days. "He's not your horse," I said. "I know that," she said. "I'm not saying he is. I'm saying give the leg 10 days and he'll walk home sound. Take him today and he won't." There was no particular feeling in her voice when she said it. No manipulation, no softness meant to work on me. She said it because it was true, and because true things needed to be said, and then the other person could do what they wanted with them. I had not spoken to a white woman who talked to me that way before. Not once. Not in 64 years. 10 days, I said. "Could be 8, she said. "Depends." I looked at Hoka. He had finished the apple quarter and was nosing at Clara Foss's hand for another one. She gave it to him without looking, like she already knew he'd ask. "All right," I said. She nodded once, like a man would nod, like we had settled a transaction, which we had. Then she picked up the empty bucket. "You should come look at the leg," she said, "so you know what you're taking home." She walked to the gate and opened it from her side without making a thing of it, and I went through, and we walked to where Hoka was standing, and she crouched down and unwound a strip of cloth from around his lower leg that she had wound there herself, and I crouched down next to her in the cold mud, and we both looked at it together. It was healing. That was the honest truth of it. Whatever she'd done, and I saw later she'd used a poultice of something that smelled like pine and something else I couldn't place, she had done it right enough that it was healing. I put my hand on his cannon bone, just above where the wire had been, and felt the warmth of the healing skin, and felt Hoka shift his weight to bring that leg closer to my hand, which he had always done when his leg hurt, like he was asking. I had forgotten that. I had forgotten that he did that. Clara Foss was watching me. "He likes you," she said, "the way he moved just now." "He has known me a long time," I said. She rewound the cloth. Her hands worked quickly and well, the kind of hands that know how to do a thing and don't need to think about it while they're doing it. When she stood, she put a hand on the fence post to push herself up, which meant her knees were also complaining. "I'll be back in 3 days," I said. "All right," she said. "To check the leg," I said. "I know," she said. "Come around the side gate, the front one sticks." I should tell you something about that time, those years, so you understand what kind of man was walking back along that creek. I had been chief of my band, not a large band, never a very large one, but mine, for 11 years. The word chief does not mean in English what it means in Lakota, but that word is as close as English gets, and so I will use it. It means something more like the one who carries the weight of the others, the one who makes decisions so the others don't have to make them alone, the one who stands in front. By the time of the horse and the fence and Clara Foss, I had not stood in front of anything in 4 years. My band had been moved. Not violently, Not the way the word moved sounds when you say it about people, but administratively, which is a different kind of violence. A piece of paper was filed in an office in a city I have never been to, and as a result of that piece of paper, the families I had led were settled on a section of ground 30 miles from where I was permitted to live. The agent explained this to me twice. The second time I stopped him and asked him if he understood what he was saying. He said he did. I looked at him for a moment. He was a decent enough man. He was just not a man who had ever had anything taken from him by a piece of paper, so he could not feel the weight of what he was describing. He felt bad about it, I think. Feeling bad is not the same as knowing. I was permitted to remain on the ground I was on because it fell within the boundary of my own allotment. The families were not, because the redrawn line put them on the wrong side. And so I stayed and they went, and I had no power to change that and no words in any language I knew that could change that, and I had sat with that for 4 years. The horse was the last thing I had from the years before the paper. Now you understand why I followed the tracks. And now you understand why I stood in that corral for a long time before I moved. I went back on the 3rd day, as I'd said. The gate on the side of the barn was easier than she'd made it seem, or maybe she'd fixed it. The wood was a little damp from overnight rain and swelled into the frame, but it opened with one shoulder if you leaned at the right angle. She was in the barn when I arrived, not expecting me or not prepared for me. She was up on a stool doing something to a hinge on a hay door, and she had a nail in her mouth and a hammer in her hand, and she looked down at me with the nail still between her teeth and said nothing until she'd finished the swing. Then she climbed down and spit the nail into her palm and dropped it in her apron pocket. "Leg looks better," she said before I'd asked. "He let me put weight on it this morning without pulling away. That's new." She led me out to the pasture. Hoka came to the fence when he heard us coming. He did that sometimes when he was young, came to the fence, but I could not remember the last time he had done it. I put my hand on his nose. He pushed into it. "What's his name?" she said. "Hoka." "What does it mean?" "Badger." She looked at the horse, then at me, then back at the horse. "He doesn't look like a badger," she said. "He did when he was 2, I said. "He tried to bite me every day for a week." She made a sound that was not quite a laugh but was the beginning of one. "And you named him for it." "It seemed fair," I said. "A thing that fights for itself deserves to have that remembered." She was quiet for a moment. She had a way of being quiet that wasn't awkward. It was the quiet of a person who thinks before they speak and doesn't apologize for the time it takes. "My husband named all his horses for colors," she said. "That one over there was brown and the one before was roan. He wasn't a complicated man." She said it without bitterness, like she was just telling me a fact about the world, the way you'd say it rained more this year than last. "He's gone," I said. 3 years in February," she said. "Fever, went fast, which I suppose was a mercy." A pause. "I keep thinking I should go back east. I have a sister in Ohio, but then I don't." "The ground," I said. She looked at me. "The ground," she said. "Yes, that's about the size of it." I understood that. I didn't say so. Some things you don't need to say. I checked Hoka's leg, crouching in the mud as I had before. The poultice was fresh. She'd done it that morning, judging by the smell. I rewound the cloth the way she'd shown me without her having to say anything, and she watched me do it and didn't offer to take over, which was the right thing to do. When I stood, she said, "You should stay for coffee." It was not an offer made shyly or with any particular meaning behind it. It was the same voice she used for everything, level, practical, no more or less warmth than the moment required. "All right," I said. The kitchen was small and very clean. There was a wood stove with a crack in the firebox door that someone had patched with clay, and a table with 2 chairs, and a shelf with 6 books and a tin of needles and a jar with some dried flowers in it that had gone gray. The coffee was strong. She poured it without asking how I wanted it, which was either because she didn't think to ask or because she decided there was only one way coffee was worth drinking, and she was right about that. I sat in one of the chairs, and she sat in the other, and we drank. "How long have you been on your ground?" she said. "This ground, 4 years," I said. "The country around it all my life." She nodded. "You were a chief," she said, not a question. She had heard something about me or worked it out from something. "Yes," I said. "And now," she said. "And now I check the fence line they tell me I'm allowed to check," I said. She was quiet. She looked at her coffee cup. "That's a hard thing," she said. "Yes," I said. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say it wasn't right. Those things wouldn't have meant anything, and she seemed to know that. She just said it was hard, and let it be hard, and kept looking at her cup. I finished the coffee and stood. "3 more days," she said. "Maybe 2, come back and we'll see." I took my cup to the sink. She watched me do it. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," I said. I went back out through the side gate. The second visit and the third I will tell you together because they were much the same in the shape of them, which was this. I came in the morning, I looked at the leg. She made coffee. We sat at the table. She talked when she had something to say and was quiet when she didn't, and I did the same, and it turned out we had more to say to each other than either of us had expected. She had come west with her husband 12 years ago. He had been a school teacher in Ohio, but he had wanted land, the way men want land when they have never had it, absolutely, with no real understanding of what it takes. She had not wanted to come, or rather she had not been asked whether she wanted to. That was how things were done. She'd made peace with the land itself in the second year, when the wheat came in better than anyone expected, and she'd stood in the field of it at the end of August with the light going gold and thought, all right, I can be here. But then her husband had gone and the wheat had not come in as well the next year, and by the third year she was down to what she could grow and what she could put away, and the barn was in the shape I'd seen it in. She said all of this without self-pity, like she was reading it from a ledger column by column. Here is what happened, here is what it cost, here is what's left. I told her less. I do not talk much as a general thing, and what I have lived through is mine to carry, and not always mine to hand to someone else. But I told her about the band, not details, not names, just that they were gone and I was here, and she listened to that the way she listened to everything, without filling the space with sounds to show she was following. She just let it be said and sit there after it was said. On the third visit, she told me about the man who'd taken Hoka. "His name's Greeley," she said. "Roy Greeley. He has land to the north and east. He's been trying to buy my ground for 2 years. He took the horse to pressure you," I said. "I think he thought it would draw trouble," she said. "Maybe draw trouble here and give him reason to say I couldn't manage." "Did he know whose horse it was?" I said. She looked at me steadily. "Yes," she said. "I think that was part of it." I thought about that for a while. The coffee was going cold. "He'll try something else," I said. "He always does," she said. "What does he want with your ground specifically?" I said. "Water," she said. "My west fence sits 20 yards from the best spring on this side of the ridge. Without that water his cattle have to go 2 miles to the creek, and the creek runs low in late summer." She paused. "He offered me $400. The ground's worth twice that, maybe 3 times with the water. I told him so." And I said, "And he told me a woman alone needed to be practical," she said. "What did you say to that?" I said. She looked at me. The corner of her mouth moved. "I told him to get off my porch," she said. I picked up my cup. It was cold, but I drank what was left. "I'll be back tomorrow," I said. She tilted her head slightly, like she was deciding whether to ask why. She decided not to. "The side gate," she said. "I know," I said. I came back the next morning not for the horse. I came with a post-hole digger and a length of new fencing wire that I had in my barn, coiled for 2 years waiting for a use. The leaning fence posts in her near pasture, the two that were heeled over, I'd been looking at them on every visit. A heeled post is an invitation. It says, "This line is not held." It says, "Come over it." She heard me working and came out about an hour in. She stood for a moment without saying anything. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," I said, same as I'd said about the cup. She went back inside. 20 minutes later she came back with 2 cups of coffee and set mine on the fence rail where I could reach it, and stood drinking hers and watching me work. "You've done this before," she said. "Every man's done this before," I said. "Not every man," she said. "Roy Greeley's never put in a fence post in his life. He has men for that." I drove the next post and tamped the dirt down around it with the heel of my boot. "Do you have more wire?" she said. "Some," I said, "not enough to do the whole south run." "I have wire in the barn," she said. "Harmon sold it to me last fall before he left. I've had it sitting there." "What kind?" I said. "I don't know one kind from another," she said. "Come look." It was good wire, galvanized, a full spool of it, more than we needed for the south run, enough for the east run too if I used it carefully. We worked the rest of that day. I dug and she tamped and strung, and I will tell you something about working next to someone who works right. It is one of the quieter pleasures a man can have. She did not talk while she was working. She watched what needed doing and did it without being told, and when there was a decision to make she said so, and we made it together. And by late afternoon we had the south fence in a shape it probably hadn't been in for 2 years. She made supper that evening. I had not intended to stay for supper, had not thought about it one way or the other if I'm honest, but she started it while I was putting the tools away and I could smell it from the barn, and I came in and sat down, and that was that. Salt pork and beans and cornbread, simple and hot and enough of it. She ate like she worked, without fuss, without wasting time. "Hoka can probably go home in 2 days," she said. "I know," I said. "You don't have to finish the east fence," she said. "I know that too," I said. She looked at me across the table. The lamp was between us, and it made her face look warmer than daylight did, or maybe she was just tired in a way that softened things. "Why are you doing it then?" she said. I thought about how to answer that. The real answer was complicated, and I was not sure I had the English for it, so I said the part of it that was simple. "Because it needs doing," I said, "and because Greeley should not get what he's after." She looked at me for a moment. "That's 2 reasons," she said. "Yes," I said. She looked at her plate. "I'm obliged," she said, and then quieter, "I mean that." I nodded. We finished eating and she washed the dishes and I dried them, which I did not do because she needed the help, she did not, but because standing next to someone while they wash dishes is its own kind of conversation, the kind you don't need words for. The east fence took 3 days. The ground on the east was harder, a lot of rock near the surface, and 2 of the old posts had rotted at the base and had to come out, which is slow work when the post has been in the ground for 8 years and doesn't want to leave. Clara had a rock bar in the barn, one of those long iron pry rods, and she used it like she'd used one before, levering the posts out in stages, a little at a time, which is the right way because the wrong way breaks the bar. Greeley came on the 2nd day of the east fence. I heard him before I saw him, 2 horses, coming from the north, moving at a trot that slowed to a walk when they came around the stand of cedar near the gate. Greeley was on a gray, and he had 1 man with him, younger, thicker through the shoulders, with a rifle in a saddle scabbard that was tilted out at the angle you tilt it when you want it noticed. Clara was at the house. I heard the side door when she came out. Greeley stopped his horse at the fence, the south fence, the new one, and looked at me for a moment and then looked at the fence and then looked at me again. "Lakota," he said. My name in his mouth sounded like something he'd found on the ground and wasn't sure what to do with. "Greeley," I said. I kept working. I was tamping a post and I kept tamping it. "You're on this woman's land," he said. "I am," I said. "She asked you out here," he said. "She did," I said. I tamped the post twice more and stopped and looked up at him. "Did you have a reason to come?" He looked at Clara, who had come around the corner of the house and was standing about 30 feet back from the fence. He looked at her the way men look at something they've decided is theirs and they're just waiting for the paperwork. Then he looked back at me. "This is a conversation between neighbors," he said. "Then have it with the neighbor," I said. He didn't like that. His horse moved sideways a step and he reined it back in, which is a thing you do when you want something to do with your hands. "Mrs. Foss," he said, calling past me, "I've made you a fair offer on this ground and I'll make it again. Times are hard. You're out here alone. A woman alone has to be practical." "You've said that before," Clara said from behind me. "Then you know I mean it," he said. "I know you keep saying it," she said. Greeley looked at me again, long and flat. The man beside him hadn't moved. The rifle scabbard was still tilted out. "You sure you want to make things complicated?" Greeley said, to me now. I straightened up from the post. I am not a tall man, but I have stood in front of more than one man who wanted me to step back, and you learn a thing about how to stand. You do not stand like you're ready to fight, because that's an invitation. You stand like you've already decided what you're going to do if it comes to it, and you're comfortable waiting. "The fence is going in," I said. "The line is where it was. If you have a legal claim on any part of this ground, file it. If you don't, come back when you're invited." Greeley looked at me for a long time. His jaw moved like he was chewing something. Then he turned his horse and rode back the way he'd come, and his man went with him, the rifle still tilted. Clara didn't say anything until the sound of the hooves was gone. Then she said, "He'll be back." "Probably," I said. "With more than one man," she said. "Probably," I said. I picked up the tamping bar. "Lakota," she said. I looked at her. She was looking at me steady, her arms folded, her chin set the way it went when she was thinking hard about something. "I can't pay you," she said. "I don't have it." "I'm not building your fence for pay," I said. "I know," she said. "I'm telling you I know that." She stopped, started over. "I'm saying I know what you're doing, and I want you to know that I know." I looked at her for a moment. The morning light was behind her and it caught the gray in her hair, and she was looking at me straight and clean. No softness meant to work on me, no performance of gratitude. She just wanted me to know that she saw it, that she saw me. I turned back to the post. "The east fence'll be done tomorrow," I said. "Then we'll see about that barn hinge." I heard something behind me that might have been a breath, or might have been the start of a word she decided not to say. Then she went back to work. The barn hinge was the door she'd been fixing on that first day, the hay door up on the loft. When I looked at it closely, it was not one hinge that needed attention but three, and the wood around the top one had split away from the frame. That meant the door was hanging on two hinges that were not designed to carry a door that size, and in a wind the whole thing would wrench free and likely take the frame with it. I told her what I found. She looked up at it from the barn floor and said, "My husband was going to do that." "What happened?" I said. "He got the hinges from town," she said. "In the fall, then the fever came." She was quiet. "They're still in the box on the shelf." "I saw them," I said. I found the box, 4 hinges, the right size, iron, still in the paper wrapping. I took them down and I got up on the ladder and I fixed the door. It took most of the morning because you do not rush a door that size, not when it's 12 feet off the barn floor. Clara handed up what I needed when I needed it. She knew enough to hand up the right thing without being told, which meant she had built things before or watched things being built close enough that she understood the order. When I came down, she swung the door once to test it. It moved smooth and settled into the latch without catching. "Good," she said. We ate lunch in the barn, sitting on the bottom rail of Hoka's temporary stall. He'd been moved into the barn 2 days earlier when the nights got cold again, and he stood behind us with his nose in the hay and occasionally bumped the back of my shoulder with his head, which was something he did when he wanted company and didn't want to admit it. "He does that," Clara said, watching. "He always has," I said. She had her lunch wrapped in a cloth, biscuits and some dried meat, and she ate looking up at the hay door she'd been trying to fix when I first arrived. "I didn't know what I was going to do with it," she said. "The hinge, I figured I'd manage somehow." "You would have," I said. "Maybe," she said. "But it would have taken me twice as long, and I might have taken that top board out." "Probably would have," I said. She looked at me, the corner of her mouth moved. "You don't have to agree so fast," she said. "You were working against the grain," I said. "The split goes with the nail, you'd have taken the board." "Well," she said, "now I know." I finished eating and folded the cloth and put it in my jacket pocket. Hoka bumped my shoulder again. "He remembers being in barns," I said, "specific ones." I put a hand up and back and he pressed his nose into my palm. "I don't know how, but he does." "Does he remember this one?" she said. "He might," I said, "by the time we leave." She was quiet for a moment. "You don't have to leave yet," she said. "I mean the legs sound, I know that. He can travel, but you don't have to go yet." I turned and looked at her. She was looking at the hay door, not at me. Her jaw was set the way it went when she'd made a decision and wasn't going to argue with herself about it. "I mean," she said, "you be covering 2 miles a day coming and going, and you've been doing that for—" She stopped. "There's a room at the back of the house. It was going to be a second bedroom, but we never needed it. It has a cot." She stopped again. I just mean if it's practical, if it makes sense to finish the work." I looked at the hay door we just fixed. "There's the north fence," I said. "There's the north fence," she said. "And the firebox in the kitchen needs a proper patch, not just clay." "I've been meaning to get to that," she said. "And the front gate," I said. She turned and looked at me then. "What's wrong with the front gate?" she said. "The posts are sound, but the gate itself is hung wrong," I said. "It's going to drop on the latch side inside of a season." She looked at me for a moment. "There's also the root cellar cover," she said. "The hinge on that is worse than the barn door was." "I'll look at it tomorrow," I said. She turned back to the hay door. "The room has a window that faces east," she said. "Gets light early." "That's all right," I said. She nodded once, the way she nodded when something was decided. Hoka moved his nose from my palm to my shoulder and blew a warm breath into my collar. "I will tell you what those weeks were. Not the details of every day, because the days were mostly work and work doesn't need to be catalogued, but the shape of them, so you understand." I moved my few things to the back room on a Tuesday. It is not lost on me that things for me were always happening on Tuesdays, and I woke the first morning to the window going gray-pink with the early light, which I had not seen come through a window in some time. I had been sleeping facing the wall, but the window was there. We had a rhythm inside of 3 days that felt older than 3 days. She was up before me, which I would have expected from anyone who had lived alone for 3 years. You lose the habit of waiting for another person to start the morning. By the time I came to the kitchen, the stove was going and the coffee was on, and she did not make anything of this, did not offer it or withhold it, just poured when I sat. I began starting the stove before she woke, the 4th morning. She came in, saw the stove going, poured her coffee, sat down, didn't comment on it. Which was the right response. We worked until the light failed, which in that season was not long enough. The north fence was in worse shape than the south had been. Greeley's men had pulled staples somewhere along the middle stretch, I found, just enough to leave the wire loose, not enough to make it obvious from a distance. I reset them and doubled the wire at the corners, which is the way to do a fence line you expect to be tested. I did not tell Clara about the staples right away. I told her that night over supper. because she had a right to know, and I am not a man who keeps useful things from people who need them. She listened and set down her fork. "He's going to come back," she said. "Yes," I said. "With enough men to make it a different conversation," she said. "Yes," I said. She looked at the wall for a moment, not at anything in particular, just looking. "I thought about going to the sheriff," she said, "after the gate, after you went back the first time." And I said, "And the sheriff is Ed Harmon's cousin," she said. "Harmon sold to Greeley, so." "So," I said. She picked up her fork again. "I'm not afraid of Greeley," she said. "I want you to know that. I'm practical about him, but I'm not afraid." "I know," I said. "If you were afraid of him, you'd have sold." She looked at me. "Yes," she said, "exactly." We finished eating. She washed, I dried. There were evenings when we sat by the stove and she read from one of the 6 books on the shelf, and I either listened or didn't, and she did not mind either way. There were evenings when she talked about Ohio, about her sister's letters and what was happening back there in a world that felt, she said, like it was happening on the other side of glass. There were evenings when I talked, which was not something I did easily, but she was good at the particular silence that made talking easier. She did not lean in. She did not look too directly. She just sat, and the stove ticked, and if something came out of me, it came out on its own. I told her once about the year my son was born. Not the year exactly, the morning. The morning he was born, there had been snow on the ground and a cold that put ice on the inside of the tippy walls, and I had paced outside because in those days the women handled that and the men paced, and when the sound came, the first sound he made, I had stopped in the snow and stood absolutely still, like the sound had nailed me to the ground. Like I was suddenly made of something heavier. "Where is he now?" Clara said. "He went ahead of me," I said. 8 years ago, the sickness." She was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry," she said, and then she did something that surprised me. She reached over and put her hand on my forearm just for a moment, not patting, not rubbing, just setting it there, and then she took it back. The same way she'd touched Hoka that first morning. Like she wasn't sure yet how much she was allowed to care about something, but she decided to do it anyway. I looked at the stove. "Thank you," I said. She nodded and looked at her book. Greeley came back on the 23rd day. It was early, earlier than I expected. Before 7 in the morning, the sun still thin and low and the frost still white on the ground. I heard them from the back room, the sound of several horses coming from the north, and I was at the window and counting before I was fully awake. 6 horses. Greeley on his gray in front, and 5 men I didn't know, and 2 of the 5 had rifles out of the scabbards already, which told you everything you needed to know about the kind of conversation Greeley intended to have. I dressed and went to the kitchen. Clara was already there. She had her coat on and she was at the table loading a rifle, working the mechanism slowly to make sure it seated right. She looked up when I came in. "I heard them," she said. "6, I said. "I counted 5, she said. "Greeley makes 6, I said. She finished what she was doing and set the rifle on the table and stood up. She was calm. Not the calm of someone who is hiding fear, but the calm of someone who had already run through the possibilities before I woke up and had made her peace with them. "I have a rifle," she said. "What do you have?" "My knife," I said, "and something better." She looked at me. "What's better than a rifle when there are 6 of them?" she said. "The fact that he doesn't want trouble," I said. "He wants the land. If he gets into a shooting with a woman and a Lakota, he doesn't get the land. He gets a hearing. He knows that." She thought about this. "So does he know that we know that?" she said. "He's about to," I said. I went out the front door, the one that used to stick, which I had rehung a week ago and opened smooth now. I walked to the south fence, the good fence, the one we'd put in, and I stood there and waited. They came around the stand of cedar and pulled up about 30 yards away. Greeley looked at me standing at the fence, then looked at the fence itself, and I saw him notice that it was not the fence he remembered. His eyes moved along it, and I watched him measure it. Then he looked at me. "Lakota," he said. "Greeley," I said. He looked past me to the house. Clara had come out behind me and was standing back from the fence with the rifle, not raised, just in her hands. "You brought a crowd," I said. "Man needs to be practical," he said. "That's Mrs. Foss's word," I said. "I don't think it means what you think it means." He didn't like that either. His horse shifted and he settled it. The 5 men behind him were still waiting. "You can't live here," Greeley said to me. "Legally, you know what I mean. Your allotment is 2 miles up that creek." "I'm a guest," I said. "Mrs. Foss invited me." "White woman doesn't invite," he started and stopped. I waited for him to finish the sentence. He didn't finish it. "I have men I can bring in," he said instead. "Legal or not, things happen out here, you both know that." "They do," I said. "And when they do, the territory office hears about it. And the newspaper in Rapid City, which has a man who comes out this way every 2 months and has been known to write about land disputes." I paused. "I know that man. His name is Connell. He came to see me last spring." This was true. Connell was a reporter who had come to write about the allotment changes and had asked me careful questions for 2 hours and written something that I had not entirely recognized as my own story, but he had not been dishonest. Greeley looked at me for a long time. "You're bluffing," he said. "The fence is 420 yards," I said. 6 new posts on the south run, 8 on the east. 22 replaced staples in the north wire. I said it flat, just counting. It took 11 days. Any man who works a fence line for 11 days is not bluffing about what he intends to protect. The man on Greeley's left leaned over and said something to him that I couldn't hear. Greeley's jaw tightened. He looked at Clara. "Mrs. Foss," he said, "this is your last opportunity for a reasonable settlement." "Then I'll decline it," Clara said, "same as the others." Greeley looked at me one more time, the look of a man doing arithmetic and not liking where it lands. He turned his horse. The 5 men turned with him. They went back the way they'd come, around the cedar stand, and the sound of them faded north. I stood at the fence until the sound was completely gone. Then I turned around. Clara was standing about 10 feet behind me, the rifle down at her side. She was looking at where they'd gone, her jaw set and her eyes level. Then she looked at me. There was a moment, not long, not made into anything, where we just looked at each other. I do not have language for what was in that look, not English language and maybe not any. It was something between 2 people who have stood together in front of something and held and both know it, and neither one needs to say so. "Coffee," she said. "Yes," I said. We went inside. I will tell you what came next in the order it came, because some of it matters to how the thing finished. Greeley did not come back with men. I believe Connell's name settled something in him, or the fence did, or the arithmetic he had done while sitting on his horse. He filed a claim on the water rights to the spring. I heard about this later, from a man at the trading post who heard it from someone else. But the claim was based on a survey that turned out to be 7 years old and had already been superseded by a newer one, and after 2 months of it going nowhere, he let it drop. Clara heard about all of this secondhand the same way I did. When she heard the claim had been dropped, she was in the garden, and she just nodded once and kept working. Hoka's leg healed completely. I know I've not said much about him since I moved to the back room, but he was there through all of it, in his stall in the barn, or in the pasture when the weather was right. He had put on weight, Clara's doing, the way she fed him, not too much at once, slowly building the gut back up. His coat started coming in better, and his eye, the bad one which I had given up thinking about, she had been putting something in it. Some solution she'd read about in a book or heard from someone, I don't know which, and about 6 weeks and I looked at him in the morning light and the cloudiness was less. Not gone, not going to be gone, but less. I told her. She said, I noticed that 2 weeks ago. Why didn't you say? I said. She shrugged. I wasn't sure it was real, she said. I didn't want to say it out loud until I was sure. I understood that. There are things you don't say out loud until you're sure. Because saying them makes them real in both directions, and you have to be ready for either. One morning in late spring, I went out to the barn to find Hoka standing at the paddock gate with his head over the rail, looking toward the east. I'd seen him do this before when he was young, this particular direction, this particular quality of attention, like he was listening to something past the horizon. In those years, it meant we would be riding soon. I did not know what it meant now. I stood and watched him and thought about what it would mean to ride him again, even once, even for a mile, whether his legs would hold and whether mine would. Clara came up behind me. He wants to go somewhere, she said. He always did, I said. She stood beside me, her arms on the paddock rail, looking at him the way she looked at things she was seriously thinking about. Could he carry weight, she said, if you took it easy? Maybe, I said. Could he carry yours, she said. I looked at her. She was looking at the horse, not at me. Her face was in profile, the gray hair coming loose from its pin the way it always did by morning, the line of her jaw clear in the flat spring light. Why, I said. Because I think you need to find out, she said, and I think he does too. She paused. Some things need to be tested before you know whether they're gone or not. I looked at the horse. I thought about what she was saying and what she wasn't saying, and I thought she was right about both. That afternoon I brought out the saddle. It was old, older than Hoka by a few years, and the leather had gone stiff from sitting. I worked oil into it for an hour, and Clara sat on the fence and watched and did not offer to help, because she could see this was the kind of thing a man does alone. When the leather was soft enough, I put it on him and he stood for it, not moving, just letting the weight settle on his back the way he used to when he was ready. I adjusted the cinch, checked it twice. Then I stood with my hand on the saddle horn and looked at him for a moment. Clara didn't say anything. I put my foot in the stirrup and I swung up. He stood. Not rigid with the effort of holding me, not trembling, just stood. His ears came forward, both of them, which was something I had not seen in a long time. Not that way, aimed forward, with interest, with the old quality of paying attention to what was ahead. I sat there for a moment, not moving, just feeling his back under me, the rise and fall of his breath, the particular way he balanced his weight that was different from every other horse I had ever sat. I walked him to the far fence and back. He walked without hesitation. His stride was shorter than it had been, tighter, but it was his stride. I knew it the way you know a voice in the dark. When I brought him back to where Clara was standing on the fence, she was looking at me with her arms crossed and her chin up and something in her face that I am going to try to describe accurately. It was not softness and it was not sentiment. It was the look of a woman who has watched something she believed in turn out to be true, a kind of quiet satisfaction that has nothing to do with being pleased with herself, because she had not done it for herself. She had done it for the horse, and for me. And it had turned out to be real. That is a different kind of look than people usually give you when they're happy about something. It is the best kind. I sat on Hoka and looked back at her. You were right, I said. I know, she said. I came down. Hoka dropped his head and blew out once, like he was saying that's enough for today, and I agreed with him. I unsaddled him there, and she took the saddle, and we walked back to the barn together in the late afternoon sun, which had gone the color of something that is almost finished. I want to tell you about a night in May, a particular one. It had been raining for 2 days and cleared off in the evening, and the air afterward was the kind that comes after rain, clean and cold at the edges, everything smelling new. Clara had been inside most of the day, and she came out after supper and stood on the porch, and I was at the barn finishing up, and I saw her from there, just standing with her arms around herself looking at the sky where the clouds had broken. I came and stood on the porch with her. The stars were coming in where the clouds had pulled back, first one and then more, the way they do, the sky getting deeper as you watch it. We stood there for a while without talking. Then she said, "I have something to ask you." "All right," I said. She was quiet for another moment. "I know you came here for the horse," she said, "and I know you stayed because there was work." She paused. "But the work is mostly done, and Hoka's sound, and I want to know." She stopped, began again. "I want to know if you're going to leave." I looked at the sky. "Are you asking me to stay?" I said. She was quiet for long enough that I turned and looked at her. She was looking at the porch boards. "I'm asking you what you want," she said. "That's all. I'm asking what you actually want." I had not been asked that in a long time. What I actually wanted. It is not a question that gets asked of a man like me in the years like these. What do you want is a question for people who have options, and for a long time I had not thought of myself as a man with options. I looked at the stars. "My allotment is 2 miles up the creek," I said. "There is a house there that I built, and a fence line I'm permitted to check, and a gate that I built to take 2 hands to open. There is nothing else." "I know," she said. "This ground is yours," I said. "The spring and the north fence and the barn and the room with the east window." "I know that too," I said. "And I am not a young man," I said. "I am 64 years old and my knees complain." "Mine too," she said. I looked at her. She was still looking at the porch boards, her arms crossed, her jaw set the way it went when she was decided. "I would not be a boarder," I said. "If I stayed, I would be here as what I am, not hired and not kept." She looked up then, met my eyes. "I know what you are," she said. She said it plain, and she said it straight, and she said it without any of the usual carefulness, and I want you to understand what those words were in that moment. "I know what you are," from a person who has been watching you for weeks and has not looked away from what she's seen. From a person who has stood beside you and worked and eaten and sat by a stove and heard things and said things and been afraid alongside you and not flinched. She knew what I was. Not what the agent thought I was, not what Greeley thought I was, not what the paper in the office in the city thought I was. What I actually was. And she was standing on her porch saying so. I looked out at the stars for a moment. "I would want to bring Hoka's saddle here," I said. "The old one, so it doesn't stiffen again." She made a sound. Not a laugh exactly, but the full version of that thing her mouth had been starting all these weeks. "Bring the saddle," she said. "And the fence post I have in my barn," I said. "The good cedar ones. There are 6 of them." "Bring the posts," she said. "And I will need to go back twice a month," I said, "to check the line, until they stop requiring it." "That's fine," she said. I looked at her one more time. She looked back at me without looking away. In the dark her face was clear, the gray in her hair picking up the light from the clearing sky, and she was not performing anything. She was just there, solid and real and decided. "All right," I said. She nodded once. We stood on the porch for a while longer, not saying anything else, watching the sky open up the way it does after rain, star by star, the whole dark bowl of it going deeper and deeper the longer you look. The last thing I will tell you is this. There is a morning in autumn that I come back to when things are hard, when the knees are bad or the cold gets into the shoulder I broke a long time ago, or there is some piece of paper somewhere doing something to something I thought was settled. I come back to this one morning. It is October, maybe 6 months after that night on the porch. The light comes in the east window at the angle it comes in October, lower than summer but still warm in the direct hit of it, and it falls across the foot of the bed and across the floor and makes a bar of it on the far wall. I am lying there watching it move. It moves slowly. You don't see it move, but you look away and look back and it has moved. And I can hear from the kitchen the sound of the stove being banked, and the particular sound of a cup being set down on wood, and underneath all of it from outside, from the paddock, the sound of Hoka moving in the early cold, his hooves on the ground. These are not large things, I know that. But I will tell you something that I have learned in 64 years. The large things, the great things, the things everyone marks as significant, they are not what hold you. What holds you is the small, ordinary sound of a person starting the day in the next room. What holds you is the sound of a horse in the cold morning that you were almost sure you'd lost. I get up. My knees complain. They always complain now. I go to the kitchen. Clara is at the stove with her back to me, in the big coat she wears in the mornings over whatever she slept in, her hair down loose, not pinned yet. She does not turn when I come in. She knows my step by now. She pours the second cup before I reach the table. I sit down. She puts the cup in front of me and then, because it is cold and she has been standing at the stove and I am sitting there, she puts her hand on my shoulder for a moment, just her palm, just the weight of it, just the warmth, and then she moves around to her chair. We drink our coffee. Outside, Hoka is in the paddock, and he is watching the eastern sky the way he used to, ears forward, the good eye bright. He is still watching. So am I.